I want to start off with reading a piece of Gemara, a passage of Gemara, which will relate back to the portion, and we'll see how it does so. So this is a pretty famous Gemara, found in Tractate Brachos 35b, and it goes as follows. Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis taught a brisa. Brisa is a type of Mishnaic statement. The rabbis taught the following. There's a verse which says, "V'osafta b'gonecha," you shall gather your grain. Gather your grain. Go into the field and gather your grain. Ma Talmud Loma, what does this mean? Lefi shenema, because it says in a different verse elsewhere in the book of Joshua, Lo Yomash Sefer Torah Hazeh Mepicha, that the Torah should never depart from your mouth. The implication of that verse is literally as it should be, that you should never stop learning Torah and you should be busy studying Torah all the days of your life. So then, how can a person ever have time to go to work and go out into the field and gather the grain? So the Gemara says that the way to reconcile the two verses is, according to Rabbi Yishmael, one of the sages in this brisa, Osafta donecha, gather your grain, go out into the field, gather your grain, meaning in the process of working, haneg behem derech eretz, treat the Torah or integrate, balance the two, balance work with the studying of Torah, and learn and learn, go to work and learn and balance the two. So that's how the two verses are reconciled. So yeah, on the one hand, go out into the field and gather your grain. On the other hand, study Torah, never let the Torah separate from your mouth. That's how Rabbi Yishmael reconciles the two seeming contradictory verses between these two ideas. But Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai is the other sage being quoted over here. He says, the reconciliation of these two ideas, on the one hand, God to work, and on the other hand, study Torah all the time. He says, if a person goes to work, how is it possible? He says, is it possible for a person to go out and to plow a field, and to plant his field, and to gather his harvest, and to winnow, and to thresh, etc., if he's going to be so busy with his agricultural work and going to work in general, Torah matahei aleha, what's going to be with the Torah? How can a person have time to study Torah and to really dedicate themselves to the study of Torah if they're going to have to go work? If you have to earn a living, so how can you learn Torah properly enough? I mean, we all have that experience. We wish we would have more time to do the things which are really meaningful to us, and we have to go to work, we have to make a living, and that's the reality. So he says the reality is that Torah is going to get compromised. The development of Torah in a person's life will necessarily become compromised if they're so busy learning, going to work all the time, which sounds very strange. And he says, so how does a person get a living? How does a person earn a living? So he says, these two verses are actually reflecting two different states, spiritual states of the individual. For the person who is on a very high madrega, very high spiritual level, and is so connected spiritually, he'll never need to work. Work will be taken care of for him. His livelihood will come regardless, because he's so connected, he'll be able to study Torah all the days of his life, and be involved in mitzvahs and spirituality, and somehow the hashgacha, the divine providence, will organize things that he won't have to go to work, and his livelihood will be provided for him. So that's a very high level. But the other verse, which says, go out into the field and gather your grain and go and work for a living, that's referring to a lower level type of personality that is not on this high, pristine level of spiritual connection, and therefore he's going to have to go into the field and go work, and on a livelihood, he can't dedicate himself entirely 100% to the studying of Torah. So that's how he reckons it. So again, the first answer is that the two verses are really reflecting a balance of the two, and that a person should treat or integrate their learning together with their working. That's the first opinion. But Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai says no. He's the highest. The two verses are reflecting two different spiritual levels. And in fact, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, we spoke about him a few months ago. He was the outside was of Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai was Lag BaOmer, and he was the very famous Rashbi, who was so spiritually connected and so on such a level that he spent 12 years inside a cave with his Rabbi Eliezer, and he was taken care of by Hashem. And he definitely is the paragon, so to speak, the paragon of a very, very pristine spiritual level of connection. And he could be on that. He could be in that situation where he could be learning all the time, and his livelihood is taken care of for him. But the regular folk, the regular people, right? Regular people have to go to work. We have to go to work. We have to have a living, and that's not the ultimate spiritual state a person can reach. So that's what the Gemara says over here. The problem with this is that the verse which is quoted to describe and reflect this more regular level of non-ideal state of righteousness, like Rav Shimon bar Yochai, the verse which is quoted over here is, go out into the field and gather your grain. It's an instruction. God says, go into the field and gather your grain. So he says, it's referring to, regular folk. What's the problem? The problem is, where does that verse come from? Some of you may have recognized when I said those words, go into the field and gather your grain. Where does that verse come from? It comes from our portion. It comes from chapter 11, verse 13. And it's in none other than the second paragraph of the Shema. So last week we spoke about the first paragraph of the Shema. So now we're going to speak a little bit about the second paragraph of the Shema. And the second paragraph of the Shema on page 994 in the Art Scroll Chumash, chapter 11, verse 13. If you'll surely listen to my commandments, which I'm commanding you today, to love Hashem, your God, to serve Him, b'chol lavachem, with all of your heart, v'chol nafshachem, with all of your soul, v'nosati b'tarzachem be'ita, I'll provide rain at its time, your malkosh, the earlier rain, later rains, and here's the verse, v'osafta dugonecha, and you'll go out and gather your grain. You'll gather your grain, because if you follow my commandments and you dedicate yourselves completely to Hashem, and you love Hashem with all of your heart, with all of your soul, Hashem will shower down a bounty and a blessing of rain, and the ability to go out into the fields and gather your grain. And that's the bracha which is being given. So that's what the paragraph goes on to say more about the tremendous rewards and blessings and the bounty that a person can expect to receive if a person truly dedicates themselves to the service of Hashem. So when you read this paragraph, the second paragraph of the Shema, it's suddenly implying a very high madrega. Madrega means level. It's suddenly implying a very high spiritual state. That if people are really devoted and serving Hashem with all of their heart, similar to the first paragraph, we said in the first paragraph, love Hashem with all of your soul, with all of your might, with all of your heart, etc. The second paragraph seems to be saying a similar idea. Serve Hashem, love Hashem, and Hashem will reward you with a bounty of rain and going out into the field and gathering your grain. So the question which is asked by the commentaries on the piece of Talmud I just read before is, how does Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai say that this verse of going out in the field and gathering your grain is in reference to somebody who's not on such a high spiritual level that he has to go to work, but someone who's on a high spiritual level, a super tzaddik, let's go. In my notes I wrote a regular tzaddik and a super tzaddik, but a super tzaddik doesn't even have to go to work. He doesn't have to go into the field, doesn't have to gather his grain. Somehow the divine providence will arrange his panos for his livelihood for him. So yet Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai is saying this verse, going out to the field, is referring to a regular righteous person. When you look at it in the context of the second paragraph of the Shema, it certainly seems to be describing somebody on a very, very high spiritual level of loving Hashem with all of his heart, serving Hashem, etc. So what's the reconciliation? How do we understand how Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai understood this verse? That's the question which Tosfos is one of the famous commentaries on the Talmud. He asks this question. I'm sure other people do ask the question as well. So Tosfos says, in answer to the question, he says that really, in actuality, this second paragraph of the Shema is actually reflecting someone on a slightly lower level. So in contrast to the first paragraph of the Shema, that's in reference and being spoken to someone on a much, much higher level, where their devotion and dedication is so tight and so pristine that they, on that level, blessings will come even more so, that even their livelihood may be taken care of by others and they'll be able to devote themselves completely to the service of Hashem. The second paragraph of the Shema is referring to more of a regular person and is not on this super duper pristine level of righteousness, and that person will have to work for a living and also combine that with the studying of Torah and doing mitzvahs, and that's also very, very, very good. I don't mean to, not minimizing that in slightest way whatsoever. We're talking about different levels. So this second paragraph is indeed referring to a more regular tzaddik, a lesser pristine, perfect tzaddik, in contrast to the first paragraph. So if you would say, maybe you could say, well, the first paragraph, the two paragraphs together is referring to everybody. It's referring to all types of Jew. Now, I'm going to say something which just popped into my head right now. I don't know if it's true, so don't quote me on this. And I'm not going to stop the recording when I'm saying this, but so just don't quote me. But it just occurred to me now, if the first paragraph is reflecting somebody on such a high level, and the second paragraph is reflecting a tzaddik on a more mediocre level, then by extension, you would have to say that the third paragraph is referring to somebody even of a lesser level. So the only thing which I could say to make it consistent is that the third paragraph of the Shema talks, actually, as I'm saying it right now, the rejection of my own thought just came into my head as well. So we're going to scratch that. So I'm not going to even tell you my theory because I just all scratch it. Anyway, I can say authoritatively that the second paragraph of the Shema is reflecting somebody, a tzaddik, not such a high level tzaddik, but the first one is on a high level. So that's the difference between the first paragraph and the second paragraph of the Shema. So the second paragraph is more for the multitudes, the Hamonam, as we say, the general populace. The question is, how do we know that? I mean, it's, that's a theory, but there's actually a clue in the very opening words of that second paragraph that we're talking about somebody who is a notch lower. What's the clue in the very first sentence? So verse 13, V'hoyim shemo tishmeu. It will be, if you'll surely listen to my commandments. That sounds pretty good. That sounds like a pretty dedicated individual. You know what the clue is? It's in this very, very small, innocuous word, im, which means if. If. Once you put an if in front of a sentence, what does that mean? An if always implies a truce. If you do this, like if you said, tell the kids, if you tidy up the room, then we'll go out for ice cream. So it's interesting. As soon as, psychologically, we don't even think about this. Once you hear if you do X, Y, or Z, that opens the door to not doing it. Even if the reward the reward which is promised is tremendous and fantastic, but if you're given the introduction to the reward by saying, if you'll do this, then this, then that's really a Pesach, an opening, an opportunity to reject and not to do it. If I get this work done, I'll be home. I know we're having a family gathering. The family's coming over, 7:00 dinner. If I clear up and make sure everything's over, taken care of in the office, I'll be there on. That's it. You can probably bet your bottom dollar that the person's not going to be there on time. Once a person says if, then it's the Yetzer Hara, the laziness and procrastination steps in, and it more often than not sabotages whatever is could be done. So as soon as you say the word, it's like, no ifs, ands, and buts, we'll say. Like the person, you want to give instructions to somebody to make sure the job is going to get done, you say no ifs, ands, and buts. So the fact that the second paragraph begins with this word if, and if you'll listen, then all these blessings will come. Well, I'm already speaking, I'm saying if you'll listen, it sounds like I'm already speaking to somebody not quite as dedicated and as perfect as one could ideally be. If you'll do this. And that is that's the kind of the dangerous word, if. There's a similar example of this. A similar example for this is the Talmud says in Tractate of Avodah Zarah, page 5, if you want to look it up. So the Talmud quotes a verse in Devarim, actually, it's earlier on. It's in chapter 5, verse 26 of Devarim. So just go back, I think that was last week's portion. So when Moshe is recapping some of the events of the Jewish people and the revelation at Sinai in verse 26, 526, page 972. So it starts off verse 25. It says, Hashem heard the sound of your words. Moshe said to the people, he heard the sounds of your words when you spoke to me. And Hashem said to me, I've heard the sounds of the words of this people that they've spoken to you. They did well in all that they spoke. So he's reminding them of the fact that you accepted you, the Jewish people, accepted the obligation, the responsibility of accepting the Torah. So it was it landed on Hashem's ears very positively. He was very happy that you accepted, and he heard your words. And then verse 26, God also said to me the following, but who can assure that this heart shall remain theirs to fear me and observe all my commandments all the days? Who's going to assure that? Who's going to assure they're going to stick with the program? That's what Hashem said to Moshe. Yes, it's a Moshe. Moshe's relating this to the Jewish people. So, who's going to assure it? So the Talmud says the following, that as we know, that what we have here in the Chumash is only the cliff notes, it's only the outline. But the full story is found in the Torah Shebaal Peh, the oral tradition. So there's more to the story of what happened over here. So the Talmud tells us the behind the scenes, or the subtext, that Moshe said to Jewish people, ingrates you are, children of ingrates. When the Holy One, blessed be He, said to the Jewish people, who was going to assure, who will give, that they will always have such a heart as this always, you should have responded, and you should have said, you, Hashem, should give us that heart. You should make me feel, you should give me a heart to always want to serve you. So when Hashem is saying, like, who's going to assure, who's going to give them the motivation to always serve me? So Moshe said to people, you should have responded to that cue. Hashem, you give us the heart. You make it, you change my will. You make me feel like I always want to do the right thing. The point is that as long as a person has a choice to do something or not do something, then you won't do it. A person may not do it. However, when choice is taken away from us, and that if I even ask to Hashem, I pray to Hashem, please Hashem, take my free will away from me. Take my Yetzer Hara away from me. Take my choice away from me, so that I feel compelled to serve you. That's what I really want to do. So while having a choice to do something, not to do something, is the power of our humanity. But having a choice is also a liability. It's also a problem, because now I have a choice. I could either do it, I could not do it. The real wish that we should have inside of ourselves is that we shouldn't have a choice. And that's what Moshe was adjuring the Jewish people. You should have said, Hashem, please take my choice away from me. Take our choices away from us. Please change my emotions, change my heart, change my inner will to automatically want to do your will. That's what we really want to do. So the point is, we bring this down into our personal lives. We all have a lot of desires, a lot of aspirations, a lot of ideas which we know are the right thing to do and things which we know are the wrong thing to do. But we have a choice. We can either do it, we cannot do it. The challenge is, how do we turn the choices into things where we feel compelled to do the right thing? In other words, I want to feel compelled to do the right thing. I don't want to just have a choice to do the right thing. I want to be able to feel compelled, and I want to feel that compulsion inside of me that I'm going to serve you without any choice. Choice is powerful, but it also gives us the opportunity to choose not to. And inside of ourselves, there should be a calling out inside of ourselves, Hashem, help me, that I don't want to take my choice away, that I want to even do the right thing. It's almost like automatically. There's another interesting example of this. We wear tefillin every day. Tefillin. So tefillin is, the head tefillin. We seem to speak a lot about tefillin. The head tefillin is called what? The head tefillin is not just head tefillin, but it's called tofas. You've heard that expression. It's that one of the passages in the Torah which talks about tefillin says tofas. Tofas is the head tefillin. This word tofas is a strange word. Where does it come from? So the Talmud says, interestingly, that it's actually made up of two words, tot and phos. And tot, the word tot, the Talmud says, is Caspian. Caspian is a certain language, a certain ancient language, and tot in Caspian means two. And phos in the African language is called two as well. So this word, tofas, is actually a contraction of two foreign words. Right, and there's a lot of discussion on this. I'm not going to go into it. It's a whole other direction we would go into, but just the idea that it's a contraction of two foreign words, and the Torah uses this word. So the Torah was using words of different languages. So again, it's not I'm not going to get into this right now. But the word tot means two, and phos means two. So at least one idea behind this, one message behind this, which I learned this morning. One of my Sarim over here, Rabbi Shimon Schwab Zitzal, he says that the idea of these two languages inside the name of tefillin is an allusion to like two choices. Like you've got these two choices, these like either this or that. You can either go Caspia, you can either go to Africa. So that in the tefillin there's this like message of you have choice. This is the power of this is the crown of our humanity. We have the freedom to choose. So he says, like a person standing at a crossroads on the street, and he's giving you direction, either go this way or go that way. And that's the story of our lives, to always be choosing and choosing the right way to go. So on the crown of our heads, which is the tefillin, is like this message calling out, always be choosing, always make sure to choose. So choosing is a power, that's the asset, that's humanity, that's what we have. But again, the liability of choice, of having choice, is that we can make the wrong choice. We can make the wrong choice. And part of us should be saying, I almost don't want to make a choice. I want to be forced. I want just automatically to do the right thing. I don't want to choose because if I have the chance to choose, I'm going to make the right choice. But yet Tefillin calls out, choose in those two directions. Caspi and Africa, choose. Like, these are two directions you can go in. However, there's a custom on Shabbos and Yom Tov. This is not on Shabbos and Yom Tov. I apologize. On Rosh Chodesh, we wear tefillin on Rosh Chodesh. Every Rosh Chodesh we wear tefillin. However, there's a custom and there's a law to take off the tefillin before the Musaf service of Rosh Chodesh. The additional service of Rosh Chodesh, we take the tefillin off. We don't wear them there. One of the reasons given is because in the Musaf repetition of the Amidah, in the section called Kedusha. So the words in Kedusha, and this is at least according to Sephardic custom, the words of Kedusha are, where is it over here? The words in the Kedusha are Keser Yitnu L'cha. Keser Yitnu L'cha, which means that we call out to Hashem, the crown should be given to you. The crown should be given to you. Yes, and it's a line taken from the prophet somewhere. It's about an interaction, a dialogue between the angels and Hashem. But the line which I want to focus on is just that line, is that the crown should be granted to Hashem. The crown should be given to Hashem. So we take off our crown, and we give the tefillin. We don't wear our tefillin in that section. We take off our crown, and we call out the crown should be given to Hashem. But taking this idea, which we're discussing about choice, it's really reminiscent of the same idea. So the tefillin symbolize choice. It symbolizes the power of choosing between right and left, between good and bad. And we have that. That's our asset. That's our humanity. But there's a time we have to almost like say, I want to remove my power of choice. I want to remove my power to choose. And I want to give to you, Hashem. I want you to be the one to choose. I don't want to have this struggle of choice. I don't want to have to be battling with myself and deciding and doing the right thing and not doing the Yetzer Hara pull upon me in this direction, that direction. Should I go there? Should I not do this mitzvah? Should I do this mitzvah? It's so anxiety provoking. I wish I was almost on an automatic pilot that you wear the crown of choice and you impose that choice upon me. I would love to just be able to have my choice suspended, be able to serve you, Hashem, wholeheartedly without any conflict, without any struggle within myself. So while the power of choice is so fantastic and it's what allows us to grow, but there are times when we want to just let go of it and just give it over to Hashem and force us to do it. Because when we bring it down to practical things, we all think about our own challenges and all the things which we seem to repeat, and the same mistakes we repeat, and how many resolutions we make, and how many times we try to turn over a new leaf, and we are exercising our choice to be able to make a new decision, a new path forward, and then we stumble, we fall back, and it's like on and on and on. A part of us is crying out, Hashem, can't you just do something inside of me? Can't you just make some kind of adjustment inside of me that I don't have this struggle anymore? Can you take this choice away from me? I just want to serve you. I just want to do the right thing. I just want to do this mitzvah. I just want to do this, whatever it may be. Please take my choice away from me. This is actually very apropos, this discussion, partly for the end, as we approach. We're getting next week is Rosh Chodesh El, next week from Sunday. And we are approaching the end of the year. We're approaching the end of the year. And we're going to be starting all over again. And we are on this, many of us may be feeling this, that we may have had resolutions at the beginning of the previous year, at the beginning of this year. And we felt that power of choosing the right thing and making a choice and then stumbling and falling down and not following through. And then we're in this place right now crying, Hashem, take my choice away. Make me feel compelled. Force me to do the right thing, to do what I want to do. So there's actually a beautiful allusion to this dynamic and this struggle, again in the portion, right before the paragraph of the second paragraph of the Shema, in the 6th Leah, page 994 again. So the passage right before this is actually talking about the beauty of the land of Israel, of Eretz Israel, and the special blessing which is granted to the land of Israel in contrast to all the other lands of the world. But how Hashem looks at the land, and Hashem is always watching over Eretz Israel, and by the blessing he gives to Eretz Israel, in fact, all lands are blessed as a result of that as well. That's what the commentaries say. But the very last line, or the very last phrase, verse 12, right before the second paragraph of the Shema, it says that God is always seeking out the land of Israel. His eyes are upon it. Mereshis Hashanah vad achris Hashanah, from the beginning of the year till the end of the year. The truth is, I mispronounced it just then for a second. It says Mereshis Hashanah, from the beginning of the year, va'ad, until achris Shana, until the end, not of the year, but of year. It's missing the definite article before the word Shana. It should say Ha Shana, the end of the year, not the end of a year. So some commentaries say, I forget who says it, but it's alluding to what happens. How many times do we start the year off as saying, this is going to be the year. This is going to be the year of my change. This is going to be the year I've made this choice. I'm choosing now to make it turn over a new leaf. This is the year. By the end of the year, it's just another year. Another year's gone by. It was just a year, not the year. It wasn't the year. So this is the story of our years. It starts off, this is the year, end of the year, another year. So the goal is to change that dynamic, to change it. And part of the changing of that dynamic is by crying out to Hashem, in my resolution or in my choice to do something, I want to choose to take out the word if for my choice. And to ask Hashem, I want to do this, now please don't make it an if anymore for me. Make it a happening, make it a definite, make it an absolute, that there's no if, ands, and buts about it. Make it happen to me. Please, you have power to do everything. You can tinker with my free will even. That I recognize this is what I should do, this is what I want to do. Please do me a favor, tinker with my free will and make my choice no longer a choice and make me feel compelled to do that which I want to do. That's the tefillah that we should be asking. That's a more spiritual intervention. But it's also another way we can tinker, so to speak, with our free will and change our free choices into compulsions. And one of the ways to do that is a simple idea, which is learned from how we know that the battle with the Yetzer Hara is symbolized by the battle with physical enemies as well. So any warfare which goes on in the world is all a mashal, it's all a parable for the internal warfare with the battle with the Yetzer Hara, our internal Yetzer Hara. So the Torah says back in Bamidbar, Numbers chapter 31, verses 1 through 7, in talking about the commandment of the Jewish people to conquer and to wage war against the country of Midian. So the verse says, Hashem spoke to Moshe saying, take vengeance for the children of Israel against the Midianites. And Moshe sent them out, and they arrayed themselves, they aligned themselves against Midian as Hashem had charged them. So how did exactly Hashem charge them to make this war against Midian? So there's one opinion in the Talmud said that what he did, Reb Nosson, the sage Reb Nosson, said that the instruction was he gave Midian a fourth side open and unobstructed so that they could escape. That was the technique of battle against Midian, giving them an escape route, giving the Midianites an escape route. Maimonides says, when laying siege to a city to capture it, we do not surround it on four sides, but only on three. And we leave a place to flee for the enemy, and for the one who wants to save himself to flee. As it says, that they arrayed themselves against Midian as Hashem commanded, and by way of the oral tradition, we learn that he was supposed to leave one side free to go free. And Nachmanides adds, he says the reason is, there's the benefit in leaving them an opening to flee, is that so that they do not strengthen themselves and meet us in war. Because if you close the enemy in completely, what does the enemy do? The enemy finds every which way and every piece of strength and every last piece of energy to fight against the enemy. So a psychological trick in fighting against an enemy is give them an escape route, because that way you'll defeat them because they'll run for the escape route. And this has been practiced, by great warriors throughout history. The story which I heard once was about the Spanish explorer Hernan Cortés in 1592, when he landed in Mexico to face a superior Aztec force. So after he had loaded his soldiers and his supplies from the ships, you know what he did? He burned all the ships down. He burned the ships down. And once the soldiers were off the ship, they had no escape route. So that was it. They had to muster up every last ounce of strength and energy to defeat their enemy. And they did. They defeated the enemy. So this is the technique, the psychological trick of burning our bridges, which we now bring it back down to our personal lives, because the biggest enemy we have is not the physical enemy, but it's our internal spiritual enemy. So another way in which to compel ourselves to do that which we really want to do and not leave it as an if is by burning our bridges, by forcing ourselves into a situation we have no choice to do it. So, for example, there are so many examples, but just to name for a few. Well, one example would be, there's like a person wants to lose weight, for example. It's a common example. So don't buy clothes bigger than you. Make sure, keep the clothes too tight, or buy tighter clothes. You don't want to walk around with tight clothes. You look embarrassed. It forces you to. You have no choice. Another example, if a person wants to learn something, there are a lot of things we want to learn. I want to learn so much, and there's so many things we want to learn. So don't make it an if I have time, when I do it, or maybe I'll do it. Don't make it a choice. Make it compel yourself to it. How do you compel it? All it takes is one phone call to set yourself up with a chavrusa, with a study partner. And I'm looking at Bruce over here. I don't know how that chavrusa, that partner's in Torah study partner, took place with Sam. But once you commit yourself to a study session once a week, then that's it. You're locked in. The truth is, a class doesn't really do the trick, because you can get lost in the woodwork in class. You don't have to come. It's an if once again. But a chavrusa, a study partner, where you set a time to learn with somebody at 5 o'clock in the morning, he's gonna or she's gonna get up at 4:30 in the morning, whatever time it is, to be. You've got no choice. You got to be there. You're gonna feel terrible not showing up for your chavrusa, for your study part, for the study session. That's compelling yourself to do that which you want to do. Alternatively, oftentimes we are so. This goes on, unfortunately, all the time. We're always complaining about leadership. So instead of complaining, let's join a cause, join a group which supports what you believe in. So now you become a member that you have to participate in it. So doing anything which is going to compel you to do that which you're going to do. So it's true that in that first initial step, to make that commitment, it's a choice. There's no question about it. But once you've made that commitment, once you're locked in and you burnt the bridge, you burn your bridges, then that's it. You're stuck now. The truth is, I did this. I had this. Some of you are here right now, but I started a class a while ago that I was like humming and hawing about it, and I decided I'm going to do it. I started it, and that's it. So I'm stuck now. I'm happy. It took on an extra level of responsibility, but I'm stuck now. That's it. So that's the idea. So compelling, making an initial choice to compel ourselves to take the choice away from us. That it's no longer an if, it's now a compulsion. So that is the message over here. So the second paragraph of the Shema is definitely reflecting a very righteous personality, but it is, in contrast to the first paragraph, reflecting the if personality. And the message is we should use our faculty of choice to choose to become compelled to do that which we really want to do, and stop saying if and but.